Welcome, everybody. Hello, welcome. This is Econs Media, and this is our first webinar. It's our first virtual conference, and the theme of this conference is reviving Nigeria's economy through economic diversification. Now, Econs Media is developing online news servicing agency for young leaders. We have various and diverse programs that we hope to implement once COVID is over. And for the purpose of this conference, we will be looking at we'll be looking at proper solutions to government be able to shift, be able to divert our economy after COVID-19 because of the oil price, failing oil price. We have to look inward to probably other sectors like transportation, export, import, agriculture, tourism, and so many other sectors. We'll be starting off this conversation with Dr. Andrew. Yeah, Dr. Andrew is Dr. Andrew is the Chief Economist of PwC Price Water Coopers, and he's a partner at West African Financial Services in India and Economics at PwC. Dr. Andrew, you're welcome, sir.
Thank you, Giddy. I'm just delighted to be here today.
Thank you. So, based on the topic, reverting Nigeria's economy to economic diversification, can we just have an overall view of how we can do that, how it's achievable, how we can achieve that as a nation?
Thank you so much. Yeah, so let me just take a few minutes to give some historical context to where the economy is in Nigeria, and I'll take off my glasses for this. So if we go back a decade, when I came back to Nigeria, of course we were a part of the great financial crash that happened around the world in 2008, 2009. And then in the period 2010 to 2014, we seemingly had very high growth rates, about 6, 7, 8%. But of course, that was a little bit of an illusion because that was driven by a very high oil price, about $100. And unfortunately, in that period, Nigeria didn't make very many efforts to diversify or invest the surplus oil proceeds. The result of that was that when we came into 2015, and we had the oil price crash, we were in a very difficult situation. So we had, people may recall, an outright recession in 2016. The economy shrank by 1.6%. And then in 2017, 2018, and 2019, we had very low growth rates, below 2%, just ticked up a little above 2% in 2019. So we were not, and of course, just people all remember that the population growth in Nigeria is close to 3%. So if we have 2% economic growth and we have 3% population growth, it means on a per capita basis, Nigerians are getting poorer and poorer. And the result, of course, is increasing poverty, increasing unemployment, and just very difficult situations. So the past 4 years have been difficult economically for us. And then we come to COVID-19. And I think if we go back for a moment to the beginning of March, which seems like a long time ago, I really think economists around the world didn't really grasp what the impact of COVID-19 would be. So for example, economists at the beginning of March, people from well-known organizations saying that global growth would decrease from say 4% to 2%, 4% to 3%, 4% to 1%. But that's not the reality. The reality is, and we've all are economists now, is that when you have billions of people around the world locked down and stopping their normal economic activity, one person's spending is another person's income. So with that lockdown around the world, of course, you had incomes collapse. And what we're facing on a global basis is by far the worst economic calamity of our lifetimes. So for the listeners today on our webinar, I mean, if you look at the developed nations, they're all looking at a reduction in GDP of somewhere between 5 and 10. They're also looking at massive budget deficits. in many cases, 20, 25% of their GDP, which is just extraordinary. And of course, people might have seen numbers like 40 million people have become unemployed in the United States on a per capita basis, similar sort of large numbers in Australia and Canada and in the United Kingdom. Now, in Africa, we're not immune to this. So if we look at the case of South Africa, with us, the largest economy in sub-Saharan Africa, the South African economy is expected to shrink about 8% this year, which is just catastrophic. And in terms of numbers, I mean, we have been reluctant to put out a forecast because these conditions are so unusual. None of our normal modeling techniques work. But we put out quite early a guess that the shrinkage in the economy would be -5 to 10%. And that's about consistent with what we've heard the World Bank and the IMF and the government, federal government of Nigeria say. So we really are facing unprecedented times. We've also said from the beginning that the most important thing in the short term is that we get resources to the bottom of the pyramid and keep the food supply chain moving. Because if you think about it for a moment, when we have the lockdown situation, we immediately have up to tens of millions of people become day laborers, become unemployed, people that depend on their daily wage to feed their families, and that comes to an end. And I think that Nigeria as a whole in the last few months has done a good job, a pretty good job of coming together to support the bottom of the pyramid, to make sure everyone in the country is able to eat something. And that includes not just the federal government, but the federal government, the state governments, civil society, the organized private sector, mosques, churches, individuals, all coming together. So I think in the immediate impact of COVID-19, the country's done quite well. But the question is, what does Nigeria need to do to come out the other end of this and really become a place that starts to grow in an inclusive way faster? We've always said Nigeria needs to grow about 6 to 8% to alleviate unemployment, to reduce poverty around the country, and we need to get to those numbers. So a few things that I think are critical at this stage for the country. And I'm going to list sort of 4 or 5 sectors and some of the reforms that are required. So let me start out by talking for a moment about the power sector. So I think many people on this webinar might remember the power privatization that happened in 2013. And we were optimistic at that point that that would really address the power issues. But the reality over the 7 years, almost 7 years now since the privatization, is the power sector has gone backwards. Certainly the grid, the part that the government essentially still controls. I mean, there's many people that supply their own power to be able to run their businesses, large companies included like Dangote and Lafarge Cement. But the grid itself has gone backwards. So the number one sector that we need to focus on if we want to get to diversification is power, because at the end of the day, if there isn't power, then other industries can't thrive. Now, there's a working group at the federal government committee chaired by His Excellency Governor El-Rufai from Kaduna, which is, he's fantastic. The committee's done fantastic work. And I expect that we're going to see very shortly announcements about some more radical restructuring in the power sector that will help. But particularly, we're expecting that we're going to see that there's some decentralization. And it's a theme I'll come back to a few times in this talk, where we need to have states take on the responsibility to really drive their own economic development. So that's the power sector. The second sector that's really critical for diversification of Nigeria and it's got a lot of attention is the agricultural sector. And I think that what's really heartening about this is that I think everyone understands it's not just about growing food, it's about the whole agricultural supply chain. So this means that the farmers need to get the inputs in a timely way. They need to have the extension support so they're growing the right things in the right way for the conditions in their area. And they need as many crops as they can in a year. But when they produce food, when they grow food, it also needs to get to the processor, needs to get to the market. There's no point in growing tomatoes if 50% of the tomatoes go to waste before they end up on someone's table. And one of the reasons we have high agricultural costs is because too much food in Nigeria is wasted in that. So there's been a lot of attention recently on the agricultural supply chain, both from the federal and state governments, but also critically from the private sector, who really have more resources and able to help restructure this sector going forward. So that's people like Olam, people like Dangote have really stepped up to kind of support the farmers, to support, in addition to programs like NERSO, Anchors Borrower Program, etc. The other thing about agriculture that's critical, though, and relates to the next sector I want to talk about, is ICT. One of the big innovations that really helping Nigeria are companies that are using data and ICT technologies to really help the farmers do better, grow more, and know what's going to happen in their area. So I'll cite a couple of companies I think that are doing fantastic things. There's a company, Agromol, led by a great young entrepreneur who has, I think now, close to 1 million farmers on its database. So combines biometric data plus the farmers' holdings to help them tap into the Anchor Borrower Program, to tap into the financing. So that brings me to a third sector I think is critical for diversification. And please, I think someone doesn't have their sound on mute. But the third area is ICT. I mean, it's been critical, certainly telecommunications in the last 20 years in Nigeria. And that's been great for the country in so many different ways. But we now need certainly computer and IT technologies to expand, not just to service Nigeria, but I think something that's critical for diversification is that Nigeria starts to be an outsourcing hub. So what happens is that multinational companies can outsource to Nigerian companies that can deliver services remotely. And I think that is starting to happen. As I said, I'll cite a very good company run by a brilliant, sorry, there's a little bit too much noise. Can we all mute, please? There's an excellent company in Nigeria called Outsource Global, which is run by a brilliant entrepreneur, Amal Hassan from northern Nigeria. She's got 1,000 seats in Kaduna and Abuja of educated young Nigerians with outsourced services to multinationals. She's earning foreign exchange for Nigeria using Nigerian brains on that. And so I think that's another excellent area that we're going to see grow. And people like Google, people like Indela are employing Nigerians to do very high value added services on that. I think another sector that's really critical for Nigeria is infrastructure. I mean, we all understand that we need to not just to build roads, we need to build ports, airports, we need to build seaports, we need to build inland ports, we need to build bridges. And of course, we've suffered because the government doesn't have enough resources to be able to deliver these services. And the only way we're going to be able to get enough infrastructure spending that's going to help the whole economy, both in employment but also in reducing the cost of production in Nigeria, is through infrastructure spending that comes from the private sector. So one of the things that's critical for Nigeria right now is to have structuring projects so that lenders and investors are comfortable in putting their money into it. And so, for example, some of the groups that are critical here are the PFAs. So we have, sorry, there's a little too much noise on the line. Please mute. So we have a significant amount of resources in the PFAs, so the pension funds in Nigeria getting up to, I think, about 9 trillion naira. We need to structure instruments so that they're able to safely invest into infrastructure on there. So that's a fourth sector that's critical for diversification. And let me round up on the sectors with the fifth sector. We've said consistently that the most important sector is real estate, particularly residential housing. We have a housing deficit in Nigeria. People need houses. We need to build houses, which creates significant employment. And then once people buy the houses, they then over time need to furnish them. So it's really a huge driver for creating employment, reducing poverty, giving people a place to live, giving them pride in home ownership. So we've been really focused on getting that sector going. This requires some reforms, things like the Land Use Act, mortgage structuring, for example, but it's happening. There was a great announcement today about Ekiti State We're big fans of the governor there, Equity State Governor, His Excellency Governor Kwanshie. Oh, I hope I got that. I think that may be the ex-governor. The new governor, we're a big fan of. We're big fans of Equity, and they've announced a major housing project, for example, supported by UNO. So those 5 sectors, if I can remember them all, ICT, agriculture, real estate, infrastructure, and power are all critical. And let me finish up, though, with kind of maybe the most 2 really basic points about the economy, though. I mean, right now, we're just not getting enough investment into Nigeria. So to put some numbers on it, I said before, we need to grow about 6 to 8% a year. That requires investment that's roughly 26 to 29% of GDP every year. But we're only getting an investment of about 16 to 17%. So only about 60% of what we need. So a fundamental issue is, why are people not investing in Nigeria? There's so many opportunities in Nigeria. I myself, I'm not just a PwC. I've started 3 companies in Nigeria. I'm committed to Nigeria, but I don't see others, Nigerians, the diaspora, people outside those groups investing enough in Nigeria. So the number one issue we've said to the federal government is, how do you get people to invest more in Nigeria? And we have said consistently that it's because Nigeria is still too complex and too costly to be able to invest in Nigeria. And until we address those fundamental issues, we're not going to see significant change. And let me just finish by saying, I mentioned before the state issue. One of the things that's critical, and we've talked about for a few years now, is to recognize development has to happen, inclusive development has to happen all over Nigeria, in every state, 36 states. We need multiple poles of development. It's not going to work. It's not working now, where we have Lagos as the largest commercial center, and people from all over the country feel like they need to come to Lagos to make a difference, to make a living for their family. And we understand the crowded conditions in Lagos, the traffic problems. So we need everywhere to grow. But that means the governors need to really take responsibility at their state level to do this. We see a lot of fantastic governors around there. Again, I'll cite His Excellency Governor El-Rufai, is doing a fantastic job. But we need 36 governors. They're stepping up with a plan for their state, how their state's going to move forward, how their state's going to attract investment, which are the sectors that are particularly important for their states. I've named 5 sectors for the country, but in many states, for example, mining and minerals are important. Some states, textiles might be important on there. So let me stop there. There's no question that we need diversification. There's no question coming out of COVID-19 that we don't have a choice. Oil is likely to remain low for a long time. The country has not benefited from being an oil producer. And I think everyone understands at this stage that it's really necessary to kind of, let's call it, move beyond oil. So I'm really hoping that as we work through this COVID-19 crisis through the rest of 2020, that the federal government, the state governments, the organized private sector, will do what's required so that in 2021 we can really turn the words into action. We've been talking about diversification for a decade now, and we haven't made enough progress. But I think the COVID-19 crisis is a wake-up call that shows the country that there really is no choice right now. So let me stop there. We really appreciate everyone's time on this webinar today, and God bless Nigeria.
Corona, no be joke. My brother, wear your face mask. Corona, no be joke. My sister, wash your hands well. Social distancing day, make you no go shake person anyhow. Hey. Social distancing day, make you no go shake person anyhow. Try to stay at home, play with children, teach them ABC. Too much waka waka fit to make you carry sickness. Try to stay at home, play with children, teach them ABC. Too much waka waka fit to make you carry sickness. Corona, no be joke. My brother, wear your face mask. Corona, no be joke. My sister, wash your hands well. Social distancing day, make you no go shake person anyhow. Hey, Danny Wise.
Hello?
Yeah, good morning, Prof. Good morning.
Yeah. Okay, I can hear you now, yeah.
Yes, sir. Welcome aboard, sir.
Thank you.
We've just had a very interesting conversation from Dr. Andrew. He pointed out different sectors like the agri, real estate, ICT, import and export sectors where we can try to diversify since this has been going on for over a decade now. What do you think are problems that are hindering diversification of the economy? What are those challenges? What are the bottlenecks we face? And how can we overcome them, sir?
Thank you very much. I had a part of his presentation, and I think he's made very valid points as to the areas of the economy that we can focus on to grow the Nigerian economy. Let me, however, take a more macro perspective. Let me start from the macro perspective and the possible solutions that we can try to change the course of our trying to diversify our economy. Let me begin by saying that the issue of diversification is not new to Nigeria. Actually, right from independence, the whole idea of diversifying the Nigerian economy was on the front burner. It became more prominent in the late 1970s after the collapse of the global oil market. And Nigeria started noticing that it can no longer sustain the level of expenditure based on the resources available in the country. At that point, the oil sector was accounting for up to 98, 99, 90% of government revenue, and in significant aspect part of the gross domestic product. With the collapse in the towards the end of 1970s, the early 1980s, there was a deliberate attempt in Nigeria to diversify the economy. Prior to that, the oil revenue saw the enlargement of public enterprises. First of all, if you start from the pre-crisis period, Nigeria was actually driven by non-oil exports. Before the oil boom of the 1970s, Nigeria was export, basically agriculture. We exported a lot of agricultural products. We earned a lot of foreign exchange from agriculture and allied activities. So the whole issue of going back to a non-oil based economy, it should not be difficult or new for Nigeria because we started from a non-oil based economy. Now, during the 1970s, we accumulated a lot of funds from the oil sector, and we used it to try to build an industrial base. A lot of public sector companies, a lot of production was set up, but that was all based on oil. And the fact that these establishments were not sustainable. They were not sustained. Partly because they were public, came to structural adjustment, they had become drain pipes on the economy. And there was a general consensus that actually we should change the orientation in Nigeria. Where am I leading? I'm leading to the fact that in the early 1980s, there was a strategic move, or I won't call it a strategic move, there was a move to reorient policy choices in Nigeria. But that is the background I'm just giving you. Because of the mismanagement of the resources in the mid-70s, the public enterprises were said to be drained on public resources. We went into structural adjustment and adopted a new liberal policy frame. Now, neoliberalism, as insisted on by multinational donor agencies or global financial institutions. Whether we allow foreign capital to come in. That was what we did in the early 1980s in structural adjustment. Now, it's important to make the point because once you've gone down that route, it became extremely difficult for you to reverse. And the point I will make in the presentation is that without reversal of that orientation, it will be extremely difficult to diversify the economic base. And I'll give you reasons eventually why it's going to be difficult. But if you go back to the neoliberal liberalization philosophy of government that still governs policy choices in Nigeria today, it makes it very, very difficult. I heard the last speaker. Yes, we have to encourage investment in those areas. But who's taught us a lesson? And not only COVID-19. Each time there was a foreign capital, foreign investment to move out of Nigeria, right? Foreign capital in Nigeria, most of the enterprises are moving because they owe no allegiance really, to the core cause, of Nigerian development. So it's important for us to ensure that it has to be private domestic investment. It has to be Nigerians willing to invest in their own economy. And unfortunately, Nigerians are not willing to invest in their own economy. Well, we can mention one or two big investors Nigerians invested, but the amount of money that goes into the Nigerian economy, that goes into the private hands, that don't get recycled into the economy is enormous, it's humongous. And until you begin to convince Nigerians to invest in the Nigerian economy, instead of you build industries for you and promote you, you'll be wasting time. So this whole idea of the philosophical and ideological base of policy choice in Nigeria that tends to say you provide an environment that foreign enterprise, foreign capital will come and develop you. It's to the aspiration of the Nigerian people. So mechanism that will enable Nigerians to invest in Nigeria. If we want to grow a capitalist economy, we must promote and encourage indigenous capital. We must find out why Nigerians prefer to send their money outside this country. We'll find out why Nigerians, even in the country that have the resources, will not invest in Nigeria. For me, I think the ideological base of policy making in Nigeria is defective. I don't think that the sort of open borders, liberalization, openness that we have in Nigeria is strategic enough to address some of the contradictions of the Nigerian economy. And secondly, it's not able to resolve the inability of the Nigerian economy to meet the stated objective of the state itself. How can you have an inclusive development and growth? How can you have that? How can you have a purpose strategy? How can you have a policy frame that empowers the Nigerian people to operate in their own economy, to own their own economy? How can you do that when consistently you undermine the productive base of the economy? The recent trends are today poor. 41%, over 86 million people in Nigeria are categorized as poor. COVID has exposed it even more. That we have this shock to the system, and we have no shock absorber. And everybody is running helter-skelter here and there. And the level of poverty of the masses of this country seems to have increased following COVID. Has much changed our thinking. You must appreciate that unless they empower the Nigerian people, unless they lay the foundation on which Nigerians will be able to move and participate effectively in the economy, this economy, you cannot diversify. That said, though, I think it's important to note that the process of diversification in Nigeria has gone on pretty well. let's see, since the if you take the collapse of the mid 70s, we've been able to actually promote and develop different sectors. The entertainment sector,